Is that the normal? Okay. Situation's different than when we met with you last time. We're talking seven candidates, 6 seats. Does it become more real in any sense? And do you do anything differently to prepare, or does campaigning not leave you time to prepare? Prepare by talking to former judges, current judges? Is there realization there that in a couple months the job could very well be yours?
Yeah, in the past I've talked to judges and some who have retired and gotten some of their thoughts, but I'm in a position because I have a pretty active trial schedule that I'm in the courtroom all the time. So I have a pretty good sense as to what's going on in the courthouse and what has changed and what seems to be working and other areas that need to be worked on. It's an interesting dynamic. If you remember last time I ran, we were 17 and we got down to 3. So when you get to 3, there's a little bit better chance, I think, for there to be forums for you all to be together and comparisons to be made. Because we have 6 openings and we're down to 7, we're in that same sort of awkward situation where it's hard to come up with a forum that really works for 7 people, because if you give everybody a significant amount of time, you could go hours and hours and the thing. So that's been one difference from this time to last time.
Now, a couple questions that actually pertain to the home rule situation in the county right now. And if elected, you'd also be taking office at a time when, or taking a position at a time when other people are taking office on the new county council. And so the questions would be, for instance, would you support efforts to include the judiciary's personnel within the ethics and personnel codes that will be written up by the new home rule charter? There's a contingent of people that are asking that question right now. I'm curious about how the court might fit into that system.
Well, I think the court should, I've always felt that the court should work closely with county government. And I think in the past when we've talked about an openness of the court with regard to budgets and that I support that. So I think the court should absolutely look at what is drafted by the new form of government, take a look at it. If they think it meets for the personnel of the court, I would see no problem with them being under. And it was, and you referred to it's an ethnic policy for
ethics
and
personnel codes.
Yeah, I don't see it that would be an issue.
And you beat me to the punch. The other question would be, there have been instances in the past when court resisted county government's leaders' efforts to reduce or contain costs. Are there ways that you think some cooperation can be done? And would you be willing to, for instance, share tip staff or other clerks? Do you think that's even a possibility?
Well, I think it's absolutely a possibility. I think one of the things is when I would become judge, I'd be anxious to sit down and look at the budget and look at the areas that we could cut things. But I truly believe that we have to work together in the courthouse with the county's budget as well as the court's budget. There are definitely going to be areas now, whether it's sharing of tip staffs without taking a hard look at that. I don't know whether that's I can comment as to that's one area that I would support or not support, but that's certainly something that should be looked at. Just as we've seen with now the home rule, where it's going to be a merger of a lot of offices over there, which I think is appropriate. There are a lot of offices that duplicate things, and we can certainly make them more efficient and more cost effective by doing it. So I'm sure when we take a hard look at the 3rd floor, which I refer to it as, although the court system's all over the place now with different buildings, they're going to be places that we can make it a lot more efficient, and they have to look to that.
Now, all the candidates that come before us tend to talk about their experience and the fact that they feel they can be impartial and fair. But what qualities do you think that you have outside of those that you'd be able to bring to the bench that would make you an excellent judge?
Well, you're saying outside of my trial experience and my broad-based legal, I've grown up in this area. I've been raised by 2 wonderful parents who taught me to know the difference between right and wrong. We have 3 great kids. I've been active in the community, active in charitable work, and I think that that's what brings about who you are. And so how you've led your life up to this, I'm 50 years old now, and how I've led my life is what's going to make the type of judge I am. And that would be a fair and honest judge and a compassionate judge. And I think that all comes about over, how you've developed your friends in your life, what your values are, what you've, worked for in your community. And so I'm confident that those, when coupled with the fact that I've had a broad-based legal career, that there isn't an area that I would be presiding over that I myself haven't practiced in, it was going to put together and make me qualified for this job.
Can you tell us what you feel the temperament should be in the courtroom on behalf of, starting with the judge, and what that atmosphere should be?
Sure. The judge has to be in control of the courtroom. There's no question about it. So you can't have an unruly courtroom, and the judge is going to be the person that presides over cases. At the same time, the temperament has to be one of understanding and one of respect for those who are before you. Not only the litigants who are before you, but the attorneys who are before you, the witnesses who are there, the victims who are there, so the tone becomes very important. You can't forget who you were when you get up on the bench and have this important position.
What if, for example, a lawyer would be behaving, in your opinion, unprofessionally? What would be the approach for that? What would be the right way to handle that?
Well, if a person came in and were I don't know whether the question is if the person were late, or if they were repeatedly late for court, or if I can think of a lot of different, or loud or not properly following up on behalf of their client. I think the way you do it initially is you certainly don't try to publicly embarrass anyone. I don't think that gets anywhere. I would call the lawyer into chambers and would talk to the lawyer and try to get to what the problem is and find out why this repeated behavior is happening. Of course, if it continues after that, then you do have remedies in terms of sanctioning and things, but you try not to get to that point. I know that sometimes that has to happen, but that should be a last resort.
And how, in regards to jurors, what's the treatment, what, in your mind, a good treatment of jurors?
Well, same thing. Be respectful of the jurors. Understand that they're there giving of their time for a very important job. You have to take into consideration their time constraints. Many of them will have families. They're concerned about their jobs, things like that, and you want to think about that. So if you can, when possible, you want to work around the juror's schedule to a certain degree. If the jurors, one juror has something that can't be missed at 4 o'clock, there's no problem with taking a recess at 4. Generally, jurors are wonderful about staying late too. I mean, if you talk and bring your juror and talk to your jury about what would you like to do. I've been in criminal cases where the judge will say, it's getting late, we're at 5:30, but we can finish this case today. Would you like to stay and finish this case, and we'll bring in dinner for you and that sort of things? Or is there something that you have to attend to that's of importance? Let us know. So I think you want that interaction with the jury. I think that's real important.
What do you feel has been your greatest accomplishment in your legal career?
The greatest accomplishment I've had is I think that I've run a very successful law practice without the necessity of advertising my practice. It's all been by word of mouth. And I came back, as you know, to practice with my dad in a practice he had started after coming back from the war. And that's the practice that he ran. And my practice has been successful, so most of my clients end up being my friends. And I'm most proud of that. I've had a terrific practice. So I think that's my strongest. I mean, obviously I could go into the things in the courtroom that bring me the most satisfaction are my years of service in the district attorney's office and my successful trials that I've had there.
Well, could you describe one or two cases in which you've been involved that you consider the most significant?
Yeah, I mean, going back in years, I tried a homicide case which involved a very difficult case. It involved two brothers, and it's always difficult when you have one shooter and one not being the shooter, but you have to convince the trier of fact that, in your opinion, both are guilty of first-degree murder by the circumstances. And in those cases, you get very, very very close to the victims. It's impossible not to. I mean, I remember the victim in this case was a guy, and it was pretty much random that he was the one who got shot. and I got close to his fiance, got to meet everyone. That case came back with 2 first-degree verdicts, and that has stuck in my mind as a very important one for me. Although they're all equally important, that just stands out. Most recently, trial that I had was Commonwealth versus Gregory Fan. That's the first time, and remember, I had sort of an unusual situation where I was in the DA's office from 88 to 92, and then left after my dad had died to work on my practice, and the kids were getting, we were having kids then. And then I came back in 2008, so I got to see the change in our whole society in our county. And the case that I tried, Commonwealth versus Gregory Fan, was an important case for me because it was the first time that I had dealt with the gang problems here. And Gregory Fan was the head of the Crip gang and had, in cold blood, shot and killed an individual. And it was a case where you really face a situation where someone had no respect for human life. And that bothered me tremendously. And we had terrific police involved with it, great detectives involved with it, and we obtained a first-degree verdict on him. But that one stands out that I'm really proud of because I had been out of the system, came back, and was seeing a whole new side of life here in our county, which is here to stay. I'm working on one now in Hazleton. It's a double homicide, involves 2 gangs down there, and it's just a whole different ballgame.
Have you lectured or taught in terms of law subjects, legal?
I have. I've taught for both the Pennsylvania Bar Institute and for the National Business Institute, MBI. And for the Pennsylvania Bar Institute, I taught on the subject of mortgage foreclosure. I was the solicitor for 8 years for the Luzerne County Sheriff and built up an expertise in that area. And so I traveled for them lecturing in Mechanicsburg and out in Pittsburgh. I've also lectured on real estate for MBI, estate planning for MBI, and I believe on school law issues for MBI. I can't quite remember who I did it for school law, but I've done that over my years.
And have you received honors, prizes, awards, or other forms of recognition relevant to the law?
No, I can't think of any that I've received directly related to the law. Any acknowledgments and prizes that I've won have been more through charities and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Has any of your legal work ever been cited in a legal journal, a law review?
No, I don't believe. I mean, I'm sure the cases I've tried have been cited in legal briefs because I've tried cases that have gone up on appeal and are published opinions. So I'm sure they've been used, but I have not written anything directly for a law journal nor for a law review.
Okay. I'm going to ask a lot of questions now in a row about experience we're trying to flush out with the candidates so that I can understand better the level of experience in different areas. You're currently practicing law full-time?
I am.
Approximately how many hours a week prior to the campaign?
Do I work? Probably, let me think for a minute. I would say 60 to 70 hours a week. I usually work weekends just because it's a quiet time to get caught up. And then if you're in trial prep.
Okay. Within the past 5 years, would you say you appear in court regularly, occasionally? Not at all?
Regularly.
Okay. If you could break it down for me, what percentage of litigation in the last 5 years, these questions are all based on the last 5 years.
Sure.
What percentage of litigation was civil versus criminal?
I'm in court quite a bit on, if you mean by being in court actually trying cases versus being in court with motions, and I'm in court quite often for civil practice with motions. Not as much on trials. Those tend to end up with depositions and then oftentimes settlements outside of court. So in the last 5 years, my primarily I have been, trial work has been with the criminal side. And I don't know the percentages, quite honestly.
If you had to guess, not like 90% criminal, 10 civil, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about just trials, Yeah, I would say 90 and 10 is a good one. If we're talking about just generally being in court on matters that involve estates or involve real estate in the mortgage foreclosure actions, things like that. And if you go back to my time in the sheriff's office, I was in court all the time on the civil side with all the mortgage foreclosure work. So that would have bumped it up during those years to more something like, and then of course I wasn't in the DA's office then, so it would have been heavy civil. But the last few years I've been in the district attorney's office, I think it's probably been 90% in trial work in the DA's office.
Okay. So in the last 5 years, can you give us an estimate of the number of criminal jury trials that you've tried to verdict?
Yes. Last 5 years would be, I would say I've tried 4 or 5.
Okay. And any criminal bench trials that you've tried to verdict?
Yes, I tried 2 bench trials.
Number of civil cases settled in the last 5 years?
Hard to answer, because if we're talking about civil litigation versus cases that disputes, I mean, some things don't go to trial or we don't even file the complaint and we end up with a resolution on it. So I apologize, I don't know that I can give you an accurate number on that.
And number of civil jury trials you've tried to verdict in the last 5 years?
Last 5 years on civil jury, I think I've tried 1. I think it would fit right around that 5th year.
Number of hearings, civil or criminal, before a district justice?
Hundreds.
Just a couple more of these questions.
That's fine.
Number of cases presented to a U.S. bankruptcy judge in the last 5 years?
In 5 years, none. I used to do bankruptcy work, but I don't do any anymore. You know, I take that back. I did co-counsel a case and was before judge. I think that's within the last 5 years, maybe 1. It's hard to remember.
Number of uninsured motorist cases you've tried?
I haven't tried any. I've sat on panels.
And as we're asking these questions to all the candidates, are there things that we should know about that you think would skew your numbers one way or the other, or things that I didn't ask about that would play into your experience?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think the one thing is I was out of the DA's office for a while and came back in 2008, so obviously the trial numbers are reflected during that period. And then you'd have to go back before the 5 years to really get into my trials in federal court or my civil trials here, when I used to do a lot more insurance defense work and things like that. So as your practice sort of changes, I think you end up, where it goes. There was a time in my life I did a lot of divorce work. I don't do any of that anymore.
And a couple questions again, where I should mention we're asking of all the candidates. Please don't take any offense.
Right.
Have you ever withdrawn from a case because you disagreed with a client?
Yes. I did that once back many years ago when I had a custody case.
Have you ever been sued by a client?
I have not.
Have you ever been sued?
I have not.
Have you ever been found to have made a false statement or an omission, or been accused of being dishonest, unfair, or unethical?
No.
Has your license to practice law ever been suspended or revoked?
No.
Switching gears a little bit, or do other people have questions at this point?
Not at this point, no.
Okay. Switching gears and making the assumption that things go well for you in November and you have the job. If you could help me understand, under what circumstances would you as a judge feel it appropriate to seal court filings or court proceedings? What kind of things do you take into consideration?
Well, yeah, I think, when practical, you try not to seal anything. There are certainly cases, especially on the criminal side, where you have to seal documents because the investigation is ongoing. So you may have, for instance, you may be in the middle of a homicide investigation, you may be going to get a search warrant, that if you disclosed what you had, what you knew in that search warrant, that you might be undermining the rest of the case. So there's a real clear example where a document should get sealed. Now, of course, all documents get sealed with a termination period as to when they should be unsealed. But that's the sort of thing, or if you're putting someone at risk in the course of an investigation, they should be sealed.
Similar situation, if you're on the bench, what factors do you take into consideration when granting and setting bail amounts for defendants?
Well, bail serves, generally one purpose, and that purpose is to ensure the person's presence in court. There are some offenses which are so egregious that they are non-bailable offenses. I mean, that's the homicide offense. So you've got to take a look at the situation. You should factor in if the person, is a risk to go back and be troublesome to the victim. But the primary concern is ensuring that that person will appear in court. So you've got to look and see whether or not, are they local to the area? Do they have sufficient contacts to this area? Do they have a record of having previous capiases that have been issued that have that would lead you to believe that this person is not a reliable person to show up in court? And those are the factors you would take into consideration, and severity of the crime.
And if I understand correctly, recusal is discretionary. It's up to the judge whether he or she recuses himself.
Correct.
If you refuse to grant a refusal request at some point, would you be inclined to place a statement on the record explaining your reason?
Sure. I'd have no problem with that. Recusal does not come up as often as you'd think it does. I would encourage, we've had this discussion, I think, in here before, that I would encourage people, all lawyers, if they have any reason why they feel that I could not be unbiased in a case, and I haven't brought that out at the beginning of the case, which is what you'd try to do, to feel free to raise it. We'd discuss it, look at it, and if I decided to recuse myself, that would be one thing. If I didn't, I think it's only fair to put it on the record.
A couple questions about campaign contributions. Refresh my memory. You are accepting from attorneys?
This time and last time I did.
Okay. And do you limit the amount?
I don't. I don't get really large amounts from attorneys. The largest amount that I've gotten is from a friend who I could never accept his cases in front of me anyway because we're so close, we're like brothers. So it'd be someone that wouldn't. So no, I mean, really my donations from attorneys are always in that $125, $500 to $1,000 area.
And if elected, then what steps do you think it's appropriate to take to maintain independence from those campaign contributions, whether they be from attorneys or from other people?
Well, I think, as I hold firm on this, I think anybody has the right to financially give to a campaign. And I think the fact that someone's an attorney does not disqualify for them from that right. As a matter of fact, I often think attorneys are the ones who know best who should be sitting on the bench, and I always consider it a vote of confidence if an attorney is willing to send a check in support of my campaign. As to the, how do you separate that? I think you just want to make sure that people are aware and continue to remember as to who gave to you, and to that end, although the campaign finance reports are online and that sort of thing, I recognize that not everybody thinks about that. I think it's very easy. You keep your campaign finance reports, as you all have looked at them, they're generally only 25 or 30 pages long. You can look through them very quickly, and you can also look through very quickly as to who gave you the large amounts because they segregate it by the amount that you've been given. And I would keep that in a binder in chambers and let anyone know if they want to come in and take a look through that, certainly, and raise the issue. But you're either honest or you're not. That's the way I look at this. And you shouldn't be running for this position if you're not honest and if you can't set aside those factors.
Is the number of contributors at this point longer than you would remember without consulting the list, if you think about the prior election and this election? I mean, would they immediately come to mind if you saw that person?
My guess is they're about, oh, you mean as to who gave to me? I really couldn't tell you who gave to me on the last. I would know some people that I'm sure did because they're friends, and I can remember my largest gift came from the chairman of my campaign, who was a non-lawyer last time. So those stand out in your mind because I was so appreciative when he showed up and said, we're behind you, and here's what we want to do to get you started on this campaign. But I couldn't remember specifics as to who gave and who didn't without looking myself. But I have all that information.
How much do you expect to spend on this campaign, the primary and the general? Well,
probably about $200,000. I think I spent about $100 in the primary, and my guess is going to be about $100 again. I mean, as you all know, being in this business, it's a huge county. It's amazing. You would think now, having done this, I've done this for 4 years, essentially, and you would think I would have a real handle on everybody who's in the county. I go to places and still know no one. You walk into an event, you say, oh my gosh, I can't believe I don't know everyone at this event. It's just, I mean, to get out and reach those people and try to get your positive message forward, you have to use media. And that includes newspapers, TV, radio, signage, all those things. And it's really the only way that you can get, because of this such a huge area and you have such a limited amount of time in which to do it. So I think that's probably about what my budget will be.
Any questions from the group?
Can you describe for us in general terms a difficult situation or decision that you had to make and you reasoned it, and I get a sense of how you reasoned through a problem?
Difficult decision in a life's decision?
Could be life, could be law.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that was difficult for me was initially deciding whether to run for office my first time around, because my clients are such an integral part of my life, because they're such close friends of mine. And it's still difficult to this day, as you go through this process, to have to sit with good friends who say, we understand, we're supporting you, we understand you're going to be going and hopefully get up on the bench, and where do we turn for our legal advice now? You've represented us for many, many years, and how are we going to do that? I mean, that was a difficult decision for me. I made the right decision, I believe. I believe at some points you have to step up to the plate if you really want to see effective change, and if you believe that you're at a point in your career where you make that when you have enough experience to do a good job at something, you have to take, stand up and do it. But running for office is a difficult thing. It puts strains on your family, because you miss a lot of things. I mean, I'm a big advocate of going to all of our kids' games and things like that, and you miss some of that, and that's something. As I say, it puts strains on your friendships. You have to miss certain things, and you have to rely on friends to really back you up. You run for public office, you put your name out there. I mean, you're fair game for any questioning, which is important that people ask you as many questions, but you're also fair game for some people who might not be stable and who come forward. And those are concerns that, obviously I've had it over my time as a assistant district attorney, but I'm sure anyone who puts themselves out there, I mean, opens themselves and opens their family up to certain things, that certain risks. So that was, I think, Joe, was a decision that I had to make after 20 years of practice, to say I'm going to switch and do something else, a change in your career. That was a tough one, but I sat down with Ruthie and the kids, and we decided, you've got, this was the perfect time for me to do it. I'm proud of the legal system. When I came back and practiced with my dad, I had incredible respect for the bench. Everybody did. People who went up to the third floor knew they were going to get a level playing field. And that, last time around, and still to this time around, the confidence is so shaken in the whole system that if good people don't stand up and run for office, then you can't make effective change. So that was a tough one for me, of recent. I mean, I'm sure over my life I've had many tough decisions, but that was a tough one that involved my whole family.
Other questions from the group? I'm wondering if you could describe a situation in which you took a controversial position that angered or offended certain people and explain how you handled it.
Let me think about that.
Could be legal or...
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to think of both. I mean, I'm sure I anger people sometimes in positions I take on legal matters. There's always one side versus the other. So that one, I think I can come up with a bunch of cases. But I'm really trying to think more things in life where I've taken a real strong position that's angered people. I don't know if there are that many. I mean, I tend to be a fairly moderate individual and a reasonable person. I don't look to go out there and create issues. I try to resolve issues. I'm a Republican, but I'm a very moderate Republican, and so there are not a lot of things that over my life I've taken a position on which I think have angered people. Certainly there are things that we've been on opposite sides of, but nothing that's angered people.
I think that's about it. Did you buy anything at the Back Mountain auction this summer?
I did. I ended up buying some wicker. I had a good time at the Back Mountain.
Anything that we did not ask you about that you particularly want to mention? Anything that you want to emphasize?
No, I mean, I think that what's wonderful about this election is that I'm seeing that the people that were out there meeting, a lot of people are focused on who you are and why you're running, and and I can tell things are getting better in the county. That last time when I ran, it was so fresh, the corruption that was going on, that people were, that's all we talked about. A lot of people would call me, and it was, the big question was, are you honest? Are you honest? Now people, I think, are really trying to get to know what are your qualifications, and that's the way this thing has to be. I mean, this race can't be about whether you're male, female, what party you're in. We've got to look at each person for the person they are, and we've got to look at how many years have you practiced? Do you have broad-based legal experience? Are you a fair person? Are you going to be able to make difficult decisions and control that courtroom? And I know I'll be able to do that. And so I think that's the most important thing we look at. Nothing's changed in my campaign since the first day I started to run. I'm running a bipartisan positive campaign and trying to get people just to focus on me and learn who I am, and trying to get that message out. And it's, it's tough because, as I say, you still walk into rooms and you look around and you say, I can't believe I don't know anybody, here I am. But campaigning can be fun too. I mean, I've enjoyed it. I like doing the 5K runs, and I will tell you a funny story. I ran the Tomato Festival run, and I'm getting all set to go. And I'd run that race before, and it's pretty tough because the beginning's flat, but then the whole thing's uphill. And I'm looking at this little boy next to me, and I said to him, how old are you? And he said, I'm 6. And I said, you're going to run this race? And so his father came over and introduced me and said he really wanted to try this race. He loves to run. So he starts running, and he's right with me in the first mile. And I'm listening to music on my phone, and my son, who's there watching, who's 13, sends me a text that says, you're losing to a 6-year-old. And so I'm running along, and I end up finishing this race in like 25 minutes something, which is where I can't seem to break it in 24. This kid runs it in 28 minutes. So now, this last weekend, I'm down at the picnic in the park down in South Wilkes-Barre, which was, I mean, that's a great idea. I mean, I just think if more communities would do that kind of fundraising. But I bump into my friend again, TJ. And his father comes over and says, oh, he's really been enjoying running, but he's going to do another race today. And he said, would you run with him through Wilkes-Barre? And so we're running together. And he's, he's just like any other 6-year-old. I'm running along the street, but he has to, run up on the sidewalk, then run back in, kind of zigzag around as he's going. So we get up to the Black Diamond Bridge. We finally get up there. And I am huffing and puffing. And he turns to me and says, Mr. Hughes, how high did the water get here? I said, we'll talk about it when we finish the race. He ran it in 26 minutes. So you really get some really interesting things out there. I mean, 6 years old ran in 26 minutes. So it was fun. So the campaign's fine. I think the campaign's going fine. We're really optimistic, real happy about our numbers in the spring. I was really pleased with I think we had over 11,000 Democrats who voted for me, and high vote getter on the Republican brought me in 4th overall, and just 400 votes off 3rd. So I'm excited. We're still real energized. So
maybe this is a gotcha question, but is there a bad choice for voters to make this time around?
No, voters, no. Everybody who's running is a good person. There are people, obviously, that I believe are more qualified than others, and that's why voters, I think, have to get out and get to know every candidate. But no, every person who's running is a good person.
Do the voters, and you alluded to this earlier, do the voters have those opportunities?
Well, we try to. I mean, that's why the media becomes so important. It's critical that you get a poignant message out fairly quickly. Now, voters who want to take the time certainly have that mechanism, because they can, follow what we say here, and they can go to our websites, and they can call us, or they can come to our events and those sort of things. So yeah, there's a mechanism, but it's tough. I mean, everybody's working. And look, let me just say this. We talked about it before this interview started. We've just gone through a really traumatic event in this area, and there are people that are hurting tremendously up in, from West Pittston and north, and Jenkins, and down in West Nanticoke and Chickashinny, and all these places are in Luzerne County. And we're really sympathetic to that. And so, as important as getting out and campaigning during this time it's really important. But we also, I'm trying to be very selective and recognize that people have more important things on their plate right now in terms of rebuilding their own families and homes, and so obviously our hearts go out to all of them, and everybody. It's wonderful when you go out. The other thing you get is a good pulse on our county again. When you're out campaigning, you get a sense as to who the people are who live here, and I've never been disappointed by that. I mean, the last time I was able to tell you that it's great to see people working every day of the week for their charity when they're tired and whatnot. Now I can tell you, having been all over the county in the last 2 weeks since we had that flood scare, people are working incredibly hard and rising forward to help people who are in distress, and there are a lot of them. So.
Thank you very much for
thanks for having me.